Hi everybody, I'm Kent. I'm an alcoholic. Let's see. Tonight we're on step 2. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And the principle of this step is hope. And my symbol of hope is praying hands. Okay, I want everybody to see this. I usually give out little praying hands to everybody, but there's just too many people here. I mean, I've been doing the steps for like 10 years. I'm so used to doing them at the recovery houses, like 20, 30 people. But this is the most people I think I've spoken in front of in the past 10 years. But the reason I say the praying hands are my symbol of hope is because that's what got me going in life, is putting my hands together and praying for something that I wanted. And I'll explain all that. What I'm going to talk about tonight is come to believe, the sanity, the insanity, and how did I get hope. The best second step that I ever heard was right here by John Tucker. And I can use his last name because he does, and he doesn't mind it. But I'll tell you what, I heard him here several years ago, and he made me do some soul searching. What he did is he got up and he was doing the steps, but he doesn't stand right here. He walks around with everybody. And he said, how many people in here have actually done a step 2? And man, like 50 people raised their hand. And what he did is he walked up to somebody right in front of me, and he goes, how did you come to believe? Right then and there, man, I could see where this was going. Now, at the time, I had like, I don't know, I maybe 20 years sobriety. And I was hoping that he would not turn around and touch me on the shoulder and ask me. I kid you not. And there's a reason for that. I said, how do you answer that? I mean, the guy that he touched, he hemmed and hawed, and I don't really remember what he said. All that I could focus on is what would I say to this man if he touches me on the shoulder? I said, how do you explain that with 20 years of sobriety? The reason I couldn't explain it is because I didn't know where to begin. Where do you begin? How do you tell someone how I came to believe? Well, for me, it all started when I was a little boy, and I asked my mother, I said, where does God live? And my mother said, my mother was an alcoholic, and she gave me a pretty good answer. She said, God lives inside every one of us. And you know what? I thought that was a pretty good answer then, and I still think it's a good answer today. And that's what I hold true. I believe that God lives inside every single one of us, and that's why to me, there's strength in numbers. I remember when I went to my first AA meeting, I was, your first AA meeting, you don't come in here feeling good. And I was really down there, and at the end of the meeting, when all the guys and everybody were holding their hands, I'll tell you what, I felt so good holding everybody's hand. I thought it was like strength in numbers at first. But after a while I thought about it, it wasn't strength, I was getting hope. And I believe that if God's in every single one of us, when we're all together, then our belief system is very strong. And sometimes I wonder if it isn't humanity's goal that every human being alive on the planet should hold hands together for one moment. What would that be? What would materialize from that? I may never see that in my lifetime, but I know what happens when we do it here. Things change. Things change on the inside for me. When I was 8 years old, this is the only time I'm going to reveal my higher power. When I was 8 years old, my grandmother sent me to a Christian Bible camp. And the man at the campfire was at a campfire one night, and the man said, if you never want to be alone again, come on down to the campfire and you accept Jesus into your life. You know what? That man could have said Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, Jehovah. It wouldn't have mattered to me. The key words was you'll never be alone again. You know what? I believed them. I went down there, I did the thing, and to me, I had a new friend. And that's what I used as my new friend. When I was a teenager, I used to, I knew that God did all these miracles, okay? And I used to kind of look out my window at night. You know how teens are. We're kind of upside down as it is. And I'm always looking for God to show me a little sign. Just a little sign. I used to look out my window, and there was a screen. And if you look through the screen, there would be a cross in the moon. And I'd say to God, now, just show me that you exist. I'm going to lift up the screen, and only I will see that cross in the moon. But every time I lifted up that screen, the cross would go away. So I just kind of had my doubts that God would work in your life. God works in other people's lives, and all I do is I just talk to Him. I did a lot of praying because I was a loner, and most of the time I was alone in my life, and I did my talking to God. I met my high school sweetheart in school, and her name is Carol, was Carol, and she looked like a miniature Cher, like Sonny and Cher. And she had a lot of spunk, very outspoken, and she knew how to handle a guy like me. And we got married. Matter of fact, she came down to Cecil Field with me. I was stationed here. I had two little baby boys. I went back to Massachusetts. Now, I'm back up in Massachusetts. That's when my days of wine and roses, days of wine and roses ended in Jacksonville. When I went up to Massachusetts, my drinking and drugging took off. And a typical night, now we got two little boys. Now, I'm just going to show you a little bit of my insanity. Now, I can't believe God's going to relieve me of my insanity if I don't believe I had any. Well, I've had some insanity behavior, and this is one of them. I would come home at 2:30 in the morning. Now, Carol's brothers owned bar rooms. She had 8 brothers and sisters, and the brothers owned bar rooms, and I got to drink and hang out with them. And, of course, as long as you're with the brothers, I'm doing good. But she didn't care too much about coming home at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. So one night I came home at 2:30 in the morning, and I opened up the door, and there's Carol in the doorway. She is dressed to the nines. I mean, she's got this little mini skirt on, and she got this low-cut thing on, and her hair's all made up, and I thought I was seeing things. I mean, I'm like, what are you doing? She goes, give me the car keys. I knew right now this wouldn't be any good if I gave her the car keys. And what did she do? I walked into the apartment, and she grabbed me right by the family jewels. And what she did is she pulled me around the kitchen, and she goes, give me the keys. And she's pulling me, and I'm walking around like this. And I'm going to tell you, I had to give up one or the other. But she got the keys, and she took off. And when I woke up the following morning, there's 2 boys, the little babies. They're like 2 and 3 years old, and they're crying. They're in diapers. They're hungry, and I can't even piece together what was going on. I said, go see your mother. Oh, Mom's not here. She left me with those kids for 3 days. I will tell you, I said in I said, this will never happen again. I mean, I don't know how women do it, but I said at that time, I said, changing the kids, you could just never get it right. They never get clean. It's all over the place, and it's a mess. And so when she came back, now alcoholics always find a way to drink. The following Friday when I went out, I said, we're getting a babysitter. So I got a babysitter, and I took Carol with me. Now, the good thing about Carol, you shove 3 beers down her throat, she goes in a corner and passes out, right where I want her. So she's passed out in a corner. I get to drink as long as I want. When it's time to go home, I pick her up, take her in the car. So that's how that came to be. Now, there was a time. Now, right around that time, I was a gambler. I smoked dope. I did drugs. I smoked cigarettes, and I was an alcoholic. And I read this book, The Cross and the Switchblade. I don't know how many people have ever read that book, but it's about a guy named Nicky Cruz, who was a heroin addict and a gang leader in New York City way back when. Dates, we'll forget dates. But anyway, going back there, and how Nicky Cruz, this is what happened to Nicky Cruz. I'm reading this book, and Nicky Cruz, this preacher guy, pulls into New York City. He meets up with Nicky Cruz, and he says to Nicky, he says, "You want to stop using drugs? You want to turn your life around?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "Get down on your knees, right here, right down here in the streets of New York." He prayed that God would relieve him of the compulsion to use heroin. I'm like, yeah, right. Well, you know, this is the fact of the matter, is that when he stood up, he never used heroin again. He never used heroin, and he got out of that, and he went on to form recovery houses and work with teens. And you know what? I was telling this story at Gateway one day, and his niece, Vanessa, came up to me. She goes, "I'm Nicky Cruz's niece." And he's got another book out, Run, Baby, Run, or something like that, and he's still doing the deal. His personality changed, and he had that spiritual awakening right then and there. And his personality changed. He never used drugs again, and he's still doing the deal. So I thought that was a pretty good book. And I said, well, you know what? If that worked for him, it should work for me. So I went in the bathroom. I got down on my knees. I shut the door. And I prayed to God to stop me from gambling, drinking, drugging, and doing all those things. And I waited, and then I stood up, and I looked in the mirror. I didn't feel any different. It was Sunday, football day. So I get in my car. I smoke a joint. I go on my way down to the bar room. I put $100 on Minnesota, and then I proceed to get drunk like I always do. That's where that went. Now, I want you to remember that prayer. My life was totally unmanageable, and my behavior was insane. This is like here's a typical, I've already given you a brief insanity. This was probably more of a daily routine in this manner. We partied real big one night. And this is in the middle of the winter. We used to take our mattress and put it in the TV room. I'm from Massachusetts, and we lived in a 3-decker. And up there's always one room that's freezing. Well, our bedroom happened to be freezing. So we take the mattress and we put it in the heating room, which is the TV room. Now, we partied big. I had a bong at this time, case of beer. I had everything right around this mattress. So now, what usually happens is, I passed out, and I woke up in the next morning to a knock at the door. And I looked at my wife, and I said, anybody that knew me knew I worked at 3 in the afternoon. So and if you knew me, you certainly weren't knocking at my door. And I said, who in the world could that be? She goes, I think it's the PTA. I said, the PTA? Now, I know the PTA from Leave It to Beaver. You know what I mean? We weren't the PTA kind of people. I said, how the hell does the PTA end up at our house? So she said my son got in trouble at the school. She had to go to school and bail him out. And while she's leaving the school, the PTA got our address, and here they are. So I looked at my wife and I said, look, I don't have any clothes on. Look around you. There's Colombian golds hanging in the air, man. I got my there's beer cans all around the mattress. I said, Carol, I don't care if you tell these people there's a death inside here. Don't let them in. All right. Go up there. I'm laying in the bed, and I hear them going, no, you can't. I'm sorry. Oh, all right, just for a minute. I said, there's no way. All of a sudden, the ladies, I'm like 26 years old, 27 years old, and I'm laying in on this mattress, and the first lady in knocks over the bong and looks at me, and she goes, oh, I'm so sorry, I knocked over your vase. I said, don't worry about the vase, ma'am. Don't worry about it. I am so embarrassed. I am crushed. All I'm thinking is my mind, I'm thinking, this isn't really happening. And the ladies came right around the mattress. They're like Judgment Day. I'm laying down there like this, and my wife is introducing us. I'm naked underneath this stuff. I feel less than naked. And she goes, yeah, it's a pleasure to meet you, sir. I mean, I'm a drug addict. They're kicking all the beer cans all over the place to get into the kitchen. Well, they must have been as embarrassed as I was, because they didn't stay but a minute, believe me. And then they left, and I told my wife, I said, man, we got to clean up this house right now, because the cops are going to be coming here. I said, I guarantee you, when this PTA gets back to that school, they're going to turn us in for not being good parents. I said, these people don't understand how people like us live. So we threw up, we got it all cleaned up. I gave all my dope to the people on the second floor, because that's who we partied with, because if the cops are coming, they got no reason to go upstairs. And we opened up all the windows and aired all the Colombian gold out. And we waited, and the cops never came. And the good news is I never saw the PTA again either. Now that was a typical drunk day in our lives. Every day was sort of like that. In the end, there was a time when the marriage was faltering. And my wife and I decided to go to Hampton Beach, New Hampshire, and we're going to try to put this marriage together where it should be. This is when it started going downhill for me. We put the kids with relatives, and I went to Hampton Beach, which is 150 miles away from where we live. And this is all I remember. I remember a fight, and I remember waking up in my bed at home. That's all I remember. And when I came to, I looked around. I said, where the hell am I? I'm home. I'm looking for her. I look outside. I got the car. I couldn't remember a single thing. I said, there's no way I left her in New Hampshire. There's no way. So I don't know what to do. So I drive all the way back to New Hampshire. I go to the motel that we were staying in, and I go up to the lady at the desk. I go, did you see my wife? She goes, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. They're like, what's your problem? She goes, your wife checked out an hour ago, and boy, I'll tell you what, I wish I called the cops on you last night. And I didn't say anything, because she got to be talking about the wrong guy. I didn't remember any. I remember yelling, but that was it. So now I go out on the beach, and it's like going to Daytona Beach. Try to find one person in Daytona Beach on a Sunday afternoon. So I go out onto the beach, and there's a gazillion people, and I'm walking around, and I spot her. I spot her laying there on the blanket. And I walk up to her. She got her big old sunglasses on, and I look at her, and I says, what the hell happened last night? And she takes the glasses off, and she looks at me, and she got two black eyes. And when I saw those black eyes, man, all I wanted to do was kill the guy that did this. And she looked at me, and she goes, you did this. I was mortified. I was utterly mortified. I had never laid a hand on my wife that I can remember, and this was my decline. This was the end of it. Life started changing when she got when she was 1979, 1980. She was diagnosed with lung cancer. My two boys were 6 and 8 years old, somewhere around there, and this was devastating for us because they gave her 3 to 6 months to live. I'll tell you my alcoholic thinking. I didn't think it was right that she die alone. I told her, I said, I don't really want to go on living without you. I said, why don't we take the two boys, the dog, we'll all go in the woods, I'll put a hose into the car, we'll all go together. Well, she agreed to that. Now, she must have been talking to her sisters, because the sisters sent the psychologist to the house, and the psychologist, her specialty was in death and dying. My wife threw her out. What God did for me, what I couldn't do for myself, I went out there and I asked her, I said, you think I could see you could I just talk to you? Could I make an appointment with you? And I did. And as you can see, we all didn't go together. And that woman changed the rest of my life. I would not be standing in front of you if it wasn't for Joanne Josephowski. And she was a psychologist that was my psychologist for the next 3 years. Now, I'm going to briefly go through this because I've got a lot of material and very little time, and when I run out of time, I'll close and we'll just move on with step 3, and we'll blend in where I leave off, just like I did the steps. There's no period, there's no ending, they all just kind of meld together. Now, Carol didn't do anything that the doctors told her to do. She didn't believe in doctors. Her sister was a nutritionist, and she went and did all these unorthodox things, and there we fought. Well, 6 months goes by, and her right lung collapsed. The long and short of it, she was dying, and the doctor told me she wants to die at home. So I brought her home, and I put her in the bed, and she said to me, all I want you to do is hold my hand. That's all you have to do. You don't even have to talk to me. She goes, I know you're scared. And now, look, I sat there and I held her hand. I'm looking at her, and she's really thin. She's like 85 pounds, and every breath was like her last. It was a gasp, and I'm watching her, and I want to tell you something right now. When I was young, I had scarlet fever, and back then, I guess you could die from it. And what happened is I either got better or I got worse. They isolated me from my family. They put me upstairs in a room. Nobody came up to the room. Nobody hugged me, held my hand. Nobody said it was going to be all right. I got worse. They brought me to the hospital. They put me in the isolation ward. I got no hugging. I got better or I got worse. If I got worse, I died. I lived. I came back home and I resumed my life. Now, here I'm with this woman. I need to give her something that I clearly don't have. I do not have that ability. You can't give away what you don't have. And I love my wife so much. I would gladly have taken a bullet for her. But I'm sitting there watching her die before my very eyes, and I looked her in the face and I can't do it. I can't do it. I went into the kitchen, and she started crying. She called up her sister to come get her, and I sat at that kitchen table, and I drank, I drugged, I popped pills. I did everything I could to take me out of that spot. So she went and lived with her sister and her mother, and she put the 2 boys with relatives because I was a full-blown alcoholic and addict, and I could barely take care of myself. All I did was go to work, come home, drink until I passed out. I woke up, grabbed something to eat. I'd go down and see my wife. I'd go to work and just revolve that every single day. Exactly 1 year later, I went down to her house. There was an ambulance there on their way, taken to the hospital. My self-centered thinking, I was pissed that nobody told me that she was going to the hospital. So I followed the ambulance to the hospital, and the doctor said she will not see tomorrow morning. So you better call everybody in. She goes, the airway is blocking up and it's all going to be over. Now all her brothers were alcoholics just like I was. The whole family is there. They're all loud, boisterous. The guys are grab-assing the nurses. It was a zoo. It was a zoo. And the nurse asked me if I wanted to call security. I told her, please don't do that. You'll have a small war up here. The guys were iron workers. I don't need to tell you what kind of guys they are. So they were strong, wiry, iron-working guys. And I told the nurse, I said, I know this looks bad for our family, but this is how we live. When they're gone, it'll just be my wife and I, and that'll be it. They left. It was my wife and I. I made a promise to her and God that I would hold her hand till she drew her last breath. And my wife said to me, in between gasp, word by word, she's stroking my hand, I'm not saying a word, and she's telling me that it's going to be okay. That you're going to do fine with those boys. You're going to be the dad that you always wanted to be. And I had tears running down my eyes, and I'm saying to myself, something's wrong here. I'm supposed to be the one that's saying it's going to be all right. She's going to make it. Aren't I supposed to be doing this? She's the one that's dying, and she's telling me it's going to be okay. I felt less than, man. I felt like I couldn't even help my own wife. Well, I said, I'm gonna hang right here. And then she's talking to me all this time. She didn't die that night. She didn't die that day. She didn't die that other night. And all this time she's saying, I pray to God if I could just live long enough to see our little boys as young men. That's all I wanted. I'm saying, oh, yes, God. That's all I would want. Just a little bit more time. Because I myself would probably end up killing the boys because when I came home drunk, they didn't know whether to love me or run from me. And that's how I was. I just didn't, she protected the boys from me. And so she said, that's my only prayer. She says, and whether I make it or whether I don't make it, things are going to be all right for you. On the 3rd day, I couldn't take it anymore. I said, that's it. I said, I know what's going to happen. I said, why would she die holding my hand? That would make me the good guy. I hung in there to the end. That's not going to work out that way. It's not going to be like television. I said, as soon as I walk out that door, she's going to die on me. And then everybody's going to say, oh, yeah, the guy left her. What a bum. He was a bum. And I said, you know what? That's exactly what's going to go down. And I accepted the fact. I said, I'm gonna, on the third day, I said, I'll be right back. We lived 10 minutes away. I gave her a kiss goodbye, and it was the goodbye kiss. I knew she wouldn't be alive when I came back. I went to my house. I walked in the house, and the first thing I did is I went to my bedroom, and I fell on the bed, and I cried so hard. The only way I can describe it is my tears were so heavy and so thick that I thought my eyes were bleeding. And I pleaded with God for everything in the world, that if he would just give her a little bit more time, just a little bit more time, take me and all these weird-ass things. Well, I jumped in the shower, and I'm smoking, and I'm talking, and I'm swapping these pills, and I'm drinking. And by the time I headed back there, which was like 30 minutes later, I am a-buzzing. I'm a-buzzing. And I start walking down a room, and I hear disco music coming from the ward, and I think I'm hallucinating. And I go down there, and I look into her room, and I'm blown away. I see her sitting up in her room painting her toenails with the oxygen thing hanging up, and Disco Fever is on the TV facing me. And oh, man, I come over here, there's the doorway, I left it, and the first thing I could think of was the pot that I had smoked. I said, that was some good shit. You know, you know how you always say to yourself, if you could just get that right mixture, that everything will be all right? I said, man, that's what I wanted to see. And, you know, and I knew that it wouldn't hold true. I knew that, well, you know, for an instant, I had hope. And when I looked back in there, she was still sitting there. She looked at me and she goes, hey. I goes, are you real? She goes, yeah, come here, silly. I'm touching her. I'm like completely, I'm not only wrecked, I'm mind-boggled. I'm beside myself, and I'm touching her. I said, talk to me. I goes, what happened? She goes, you're not going to believe this. I said, I don't even believe what I'm seeing. She said, 15 minutes ago, she goes, I choked. I thought it was all over, and then I spit something up, and I could breathe. I said, well, did you tell anybody? I mean, did you call the nurses in or anything? She goes, well, look what time it is. It's 11 o'clock at night. I said, Carol, come on. Now, look, if it was me laying there, I'd be going from room to room telling all these people that are dying, Jesus is coming in next. You know, that's what I would be doing. And so I said, you know, Carol, the whole family is down at the bar rooms waiting for the call. Yeah, she's gone. She's gone. And so I said, did you call your mother? She goes, no, I'll go give him a call tomorrow. I said, Carol, this is no big deal to you? She goes, Ken, it's 11 o'clock at night. Okay, I know where they all are. We're all down the bar room. I'm going to do what every good alcoholic does. I'm going down there to tell them. So I get out to the bar room, and my brother, and it's mobbed, but it's like a morgue. I go walking in there, and I'm telling them what happened, just like I'm telling you right now. I'm talking as fast, as loud as I can. I said, guys, part the seats because Jesus is coming in. And then my brother Mike was sitting at the bar, and he says to the guy next to him, he goes, John, get off there. Kent, sit down. He goes, Jeannie, give Kent anything he wants. Give him a double. And I looked at Mike, I said, Mike, you don't understand. She's going to walk out of that hospital. And you know what? That's all I remember. I don't remember any more that night. I woke up in my bed the following night. I was a blackout drinker, and I woke up the following morning, and I said to myself, man, did she die? Did she die or she didn't die? And I went down the bar. I can't remember if I went down the bar first. I figured I blew it. So I went to the hospital, and there's just all kinds of doctors in a room, and I figured that she's gone. So I walk up there, and he goes, are you the husband? And I'm really downtrodden. I said, yeah. He goes, well, we just took an x-ray of your wife. I said, my wife's alive? He goes, well, not only is she alive, he said, she wants out of here. I goes, well, what's going on? He said, well, we just took an x-ray. He said, we can't explain it. We gave her a bed to die in. He said, I want to tell you right now that your wife's cancer is gone. So it was in remission. Now, I want to tell you something. My wife's recovery was so profound. She lived another 13 years, and she died when the youngest boy was 20 years old. So she got her prayer. And she's profiled in a book written by Dr. Paul Roud, and the name of that book is called Making Miracles, and this is the book right here. And I always bring this book because people, you know, if you're anything like me, I'm a doubting Thomas. But she's profiled in this book, and her profile compared to the rest of the stories in this book, her profile is like this big. And so, but her recovery was certainly profound. Now, I asked the doctors, I said, well, what do you think we ought to do? He said, I think you ought to take your wife and leave here and live every day like it was your last. Okay, I can do that. I took our life savings. I took our life savings. Her mother gave me $10,000. I bought a van. My kids were still staying with relatives. I got a wheelchair, oxygen tank. Now, the psychologist said, be prepared to come back with a corpse. He says, you're taking a woman right out of the hospital and you're going across country in January. You don't know where you're going. My brother-in-law gives me a .44 Magnum. I had no clue what it was, but I know it was big and it was heavy. And I don't even know how to shoot a gun at this time. And my brother says to me, you're going to be going across deserts. And I told her, let's go on. I said, wouldn't you want to see as much of America as you could see? She goes, yes, that's what I want to do. So we were going to go around America. And before she died. So my brother gives me this gun. And I got a Coleman stove because we would be camping along the way for some bright reason in November and December. I don't know what I was thinking of, but I got all this stuff. So we got the van loaded. I got an ounce of pot. I got the gun. I got a case of beer, and she's got her Black Beauty pain pills. Thank God we had those. And because I didn't realize that your back can hurt so much. I did all the driving. And I never knew, I couldn't move. I could not move. If she gave me one of those painkillers, I could drive to Europe. I'll tell you right now, the first place, and this is the first time in my life, when we sat in that van, I said to my wife, I said, before we start out on this trip, I said, I don't know how it's going to end up, but we never prayed together. I said, I want to look at her, and I said, I think we ought to say a little prayer before that we make it back alive. And we did, and I said, okay, now, first day, I'm in the Pocono Mountains, it's January, and what hits? A blizzard. I have no snow tires on my van. I'm a mechanic. I'm not even thinking, why don't I have snow tires on my van? I live in Massachusetts. Well, anyway, I'm stuck in the Pocono Mountains. I'm on this mountain, and the van keeps shutting off because there was something wrong with it. And there's trucks jackknifing. You couldn't see 20 feet in front of you. And there's cars all over the place. They just couldn't make it up the mountain. We were on this super highway, and everything was like all over the place. And I'm looking at my wife. She's so frail. And you know what she was doing? She was sitting there crocheting. She crocheted the entire trip. That she just sat there. She wasn't concerned about anything. Me, I'm saying to myself, what have I got this woman into? I'm stuck in a blizzard in the Pocono Mountains. The van's cutting out. We're going to freeze to death right here in the van. And she goes, oh, you'll figure something out. I did what I do best. I prayed. I swear to God, I prayed. It was, God, just please, somehow get us out of this. As God strike me dead, this is exactly what happened. I put my van in low gear, and I stepped on that gas just a little bit, and my van started creeping. It's moving. I'm moving forward, and I went around the car in front of me, around the truck that was on fire. The wheel was on fire, and I went all around the broken down people, all the way at the top of the mountain. And when I got to the top of the mountain, as God struck me, I saw a light in the distance, a light in the fog. And I looked at my wife, and I said, you see that light? I don't know what it is, but that's where we're headed. And I just kept my eye, I couldn't see anything but that light. And I kept going down the mountain, down, and I finally went there, and it was a motel, and they had one room left. That is the God's truth. Now, I got enough time to tell you a couple of things what happened on this trip. Now I want you to keep in mind, this is all about the second step and how I came to believe. And I want you to understand, I mean, some of the things I've already told you, they're pretty hard to swallow. Now, I asked her where she wanted to go. She wanted to go see Elvis Presley's grave. We did that. After that, I said, well, you want to go see the Grand Canyon? We did that. Wanted to go to Las Vegas. And then for some reason, she wanted to go to Mexico. What's the big deal? So I get down, we head to Mexico, we go past Texas and we're down there and come right to the Mexican border, and they go like this. Now I'm not thinking, right? I'm not thinking. And I pull up to the Mexican border and they go like this. And we drive through, we go to Mexico, and we just have a great time. We're buying Mexican stuff, and at the end of the day, it's nighttime. And I got lost. I didn't know where the hell I was. And I want to go home now. So we find our way to the border, and I get to the border, and this is what the lady said. I pull up to the border, and the lady looks at me, and she goes, "What's your heritage?" I want you to think about that for a minute. What is your heritage? So I'm saying to myself, am I Italian? Am I American? They want to know where I was born. And she said to me again, "Sir, what is your heritage?" I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "What are you, a smart ass? Pull that van over there." You ever see that movie Midnight Express? It was at that moment that I saw all the signs. There was a picture of a gun with a red cross going through it. There's a picture of marijuana leaves with a starch going through it. And over here was El J-Lo. Okay? And I looked at my wife and I said, "You're going to die in a Mexican prison." We're done. We're done. So now what I did is I took the gun, before I went into Mexico, I took the gun and I put it in a Coleman stove. I don't know why I did that. I really didn't intend to shoot anybody. Or my brother-in-law told me, he said, if you're in the desert in the middle of the night, you hear a noise outside, don't go outside, just aim it, shoot, and the noise will go away. I wasn't about to do that. So I just hit the gun in a Coleman stove. But I knew where I put the drugs. I put the drugs in a small suitcase. You know, you got big. Well, it was in bed. And so, and I want you to know that I stood there and these guys are ripping my van apart. I mean, they are pulling everything out of there. And you know, just like in a Midnight Express, my heart is going like this. And I got sweat beating down my face. And I says, "Can my wife sit here? She's sick." He goes, "Oh yeah, she can sit right here." And she's just sitting there. She doesn't give two shits about anything. She's just sitting there crocheting. It's no big deal. And I told her, I said, "I'm going to tell you, they're going to rip you right out of here in a minute." So I'm standing there, and they got all my suitcases open, and this guy opens it up, and it comes right down. I put the dope there myself. And he opens it up, I'm ready to pass out, and they look, and there's nothing in it. And I'm looking at them, they're like, "Wow." Okay? I don't know where it is, but I just didn't want it to be there. So I look in the van, and I see the guy going like this at a Coleman stove. I goes, "Oh, jeez, gonna find the gun." He opens it up, and you know what he sees? You know the red canister that's filled with gas? Well, that's going back and forth, and I had the gun behind it. And what this guy focuses on is the gas tank. And he looks, he shakes it, and he closes the cover, and he puts it down. I'm like, "Oh, hallelujah, hallelujah." And the guy said to me, he said, "By the way, whose oxygen tank and what's the wheelchair for?" I said, "Sir," I said, my wife is terminally ill. She's got lung cancer." He says, "That's why we came to Mexico." And he goes, they looked at each other and he goes, "Oh man, get out of here." Now, do you want to know how long it took me to pack that van? Blink. And I want to tell you, man, I went 100 miles an hour across that border, and I didn't dare stop until I was way into Texas, in the middle of nowhere, until I pulled that van over. I got over to my wife's side. I'm leaning up against the door, and I took the longest piss I ever took in my life. And I look at my wife, and I said, "All I want to know is what happened to the dope." And she looks at me and she goes, "Well, I knew that you were a dope head." She said, "So I took the dope," and she takes her crocheting needle and she goes, and she picks up all her crocheting, and right at the end of the crocheting is the bag of dope. If you don't believe in a higher power after that story, I don't know what is. You know, little did I know, my wife may have been terminally ill, and she did live another 13 years. However, I was terminally ill also. I didn't know it though. I had alcoholism, and I was killing myself one day at a time. And I saw the psychologist, and I told her, I said, I don't know what to do. I can't take it. I left my wife briefly. My wife, we came back off that trip, and she wouldn't renew any more of her pills, and I was bootlegging stuff off the street, and I just went downhill. And it turned out we separated, and I moved into Drug City, and before you know it, the guilt ate me up. I tried to commit suicide, and the psychologist put me at Spofford Hall Treatment Center. And when I was at that treatment center, I was in detox a while, and then when I got out of detox, my caseworker Beverly calls me in the office, and she goes, "We noticed that you don't mingle with anybody, you don't smile, you don't talk to anybody, you're a loner." She said, "We're going to help you with that." I goes, "Well, I didn't know I needed help with that." And she said, "Well, we think you do." And she hands me a kite. I said, "What do you want me to do with this?" She goes, "Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, we want you to be out on Spofford Lake." It's a pretty nice place. And she said, "I want you to be out there at 9 o'clock on the lake, and I want you to fly this kite." I looked at her, and I started laughing. I said, "Well, let me get this straight." I said, I'm a drug addict and an alcoholic. My wife is terminally ill. My little kids have no idea where their daddy is. I said, "I don't even know where the hell Spofford, New Hampshire is." I said, "I'm in this freaking hospital, and you want me to go fly a kite. Is that right?" And they started laughing, the caseworker and her other sidekick. And she goes, "Yeah, that's about right." I said, "Well, how is that supposed to help me with alcoholism?" She goes, "That's for us to know and for you to find out." I said, "Well, I'm not going to do it." She says, "You'll either do one of two things tomorrow at 9 o'clock. You'll either fly that kite, or you can get off your bed, pack your bags, and leave, make room for somebody who wants to get sober." I had no place to go. I had tried to commit suicide, and the way the psychologist got me into treatment, she goes, "You can always go back to plan A." And that's how I ended up in the treatment. And I said, I was up all night. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I said, "Well, I'll just go out there, and I'll just pretend I'm going to fly the kite." So I get out there, and I'm holding the kite, and it's only got 10 feet of string, and so I knew it's August. My sobriety date is August 19th, 1983, and there's no wind. I just kind of give it like that, and I look up, now there's 100 people at this treatment center. There's an upstairs and a downstairs, and they're all in the windows. And they're all going, "Oh, you can do it, buddy! You can do it!" And I felt this big. I'm saying to myself, what the hell does this woman do? Put out a bulletin that at 9 o'clock there's going to be this ass out on the lake to give them a show? So I held the thing up, and it fell to the ground. And my caseworker, I spotted her, and she goes like this. I said to myself, this bitch wants me to run with this kite. So I spot the door, I spot the exit door, the entrance door to Spofford Hall, and I said, "All right, I'll run with it." I ran to the exit door, and the kite bounced along, it broke. The kite went that way, I went inside the door, that was the end of it. At the end of that afternoon, I go to see my caseworker, Beverly, and she gives me this big old hug, and she goes, "You have no idea. We're so proud of you. You did so much growth." I said, "Man, I was scared to death out there." She goes, "Oh, I knew you were. I knew you were, but the big thing is that you were there. And tomorrow morning you might even get a chance to fly that kite." I said, What do you mean tomorrow?" She goes, "Yeah, I told you every day." I said, No, you didn't tell me every day. I said, "You told me I remember, you said just tomorrow." She goes, "No, well, the same deal applies. If you're not out there at 9 o'clock, pack your bags." Okay, I was out there the following morning, but there was one difference. There was a girl out there and a guy out there. The guy had a ball of string, the girl had a nylon, and the three of us got that kite flying over Spofford Lake. By the end of 6 weeks of treatment, every single one of the people that was in the building, they were all out at 9 o'clock every morning with me, and we were running this one kite all around, and everybody's laughing, joking. I had all these new friends. My personality was changing. I could smile. I no longer had that stoic Bronson look. I mean, I had a new family, man. And that's when I finally learned that, this is the WE program. And I just knew. I knew that I just didn't want to leave there. And they gave me the tools. I left there, and they gave me the tools which I didn't use. I didn't use them for 13 years. And I'm going to tell you one more. I got enough time for this one story. And all these stories, I just want to tell you that I believed there was divine intervention in all these things I'm telling you. God looks out for fools and drunks. I was my first year of sobriety. I moved to Jacksonville with a woman, her little girl, my oldest son, and I went to the Java Club once. I gave an old-timer, his name was Charlie. I gave him my telephone number. He gave me his, and he said, we'll do some meetings. I said, yeah, right. So I leave the meeting and I throw his number away. 3 years later, the girl that I came down with packs up her little girl and leaves. Says, you're a mental case. Nobody likes you. I don't like you. You can't get along with anybody. She says, man, I don't know what. She says, we'd rather have you drink. Well, I didn't even know what they were talking about. Everybody said I'd be a nice guy if I just didn't drink. Obviously, they were wrong. I wasn't a nice guy. I was crude, rude. I was obnoxious. And man, she left. And I'll tell you what, that emotional pain sets in, and that does you. I did it for 2 weeks. I cried myself to sleep, and after 2 weeks, I said, you know what? I know one thing that works for certain. That's drinking and drugging. I just wanted out of this pain for one night. And so I got in the shower. I knew where I was going, and I'm in the shower. I hear the phone ringing, and I think it's her. So I jump out of the shower. I pick up the phone, and it's this guy, Charlie, from 1984. This is like 1987. And Charlie says to me, how's your day going? I could not believe it. I come unglued on the poor guy. I told him exactly what was going on. And he said, whoa there, young fella. He said, let me tell you something. He said, how I came to call you, he said, I was cleaning out my wallet. Your telephone number fell on the floor, and before I threw it away, I figured I'd try to see if the number's still good. He said, I see the number is still good, but you don't seem to be doing that well. What do you say I come over, we go to a meeting? No. I do not want to be rescued. I don't want, and this, you know guys that are really in AA, guys that work with others, compassionate and loving. This guy he spoke like Jim Free. He's got that soft, compassionate voice. You just can't get mad at a guy like that. You know what I mean? So I wanted to hang up on him, but I didn't want to be rude to the old-timer, So I said, all right, man, yeah, whatever. I said, nothing happens in Jacksonville until 10 o'clock anyway. So he comes and gets me. We go to a meeting. It takes me to an accessory group, the smokiest meeting in town. I don't even smoke. I'm sitting there. I cannot even see the chairperson because of the smoke. That's how bad it is. I am like, I don't want to be here at all. After the meeting, I get in the car, and Charlie says to me, where do you want to go? I said, man, I don't know if it was the smoke or the meeting. I want to go home. I don't feel good. So I went home, and the following morning, Charlie was right there to pick me up, and he babysat me for 2 weeks. Finally, Barbara came back with the little girl, and the pain was gone, and I said to Charlie, thanks, man. You carried me through. Now I see what this AA thing is all about. I don't need to go to those meetings now. I'm really in a good shape. He goes, Kent, you don't understand. You don't understand. He says, it gets better. It gets better. I said, Charlie, you don't understand. We're going to get married. I'm going to make sure she doesn't do this again. I'm going to marry her, man. She ain't running off nowhere. And so there it was. I kicked Charlie off, and I've never seen Charlie again. I believe that God puts people in our life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And remember that prayer that I was telling you at the beginning in the bathroom on my knees? And I asked God to remove all those things from my life? Well, I want you to know that I'm 62 years old right now. And I don't gamble, I don't smoke, I don't do drugs, and I don't drink. So, you know what I learned? Was that prayer answered? I believe it was, and the thing that I learned the most from that is that my time and God's time is not the same time. And that, my friends, is how I came